going to go ahead and call to order this meeting of the Santa Barbara Unified School District's Board of Education for Tuesday, May 23rd, 2017. And we will begin by rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Matsuoka.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tenemos interpretación al español para los que gusten escuchar la reunión en español.
Thank you. And we do have headsets available for the hearing impaired. They are available at the side table if anybody wants to ask for one there. That brings us to our item on the announcement of closed session action. In closed session, we looked at a number of items. We only took action on one, and that was on item D3, public employee appointment. It was moved by Ms. Sims-Moten and seconded by Mr. Paredes Ulloa that we appoint 3 new Dean of Students. One is Nate Mendoza, who's going to Dos Pueblos High School. Another is Mario Rodriguez, who's going to Santa Barbara High School. And then Jennifer Balacious, who is moving to being appointed to San Marcos. We also moved to appoint 2 assistant principals, Shannon York, who's going to Dos Pueblos High School, and Matt Stockton going to Santa Barbara High School, and that was a unanimous vote, 5-0. And that is all of our closed session action, and that brings us to the superintendent's report. Mr. Matsuoka.
So the first recognition we're going to do is to some employees who've been with our district. What's the range? Oh, it's 30 years and 35 years. So I see some smiling faces out there. And, you know, when someone is committed, wow, like decades of their life and their career to one district, it says a lot about you as employees. So I'm going to come down there, and Mitch Torina is going to read your names off and how many years you've served.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Matsuoka. First off, we have Joanne Keynes at Lacombe Virginia Heights, serving 30 years. We have Mary Catherine Lippman from Cleveland, serving 30 years. Eugenia Murillo, serving 30 years.
There you go.
Rosa Ortiz, serving 30 years. Susan Park from San Marcos High School, 30 years. I think she's not in attendance tonight. Cecilia Rios from Santa Barbara High, 30 years. Wait, what? Ginger Sandoval, 30 years, food service. Not a day over 30, Ginger, not a day. And Michael Torres, Goleta Valley Junior High for 30 years. And Hector Vega from Roosevelt Elementary, 30-year service.
All right, her first. It's going to be in the newsletter.
Great.
Thank you. Ready? 160 and 150.
Elizabeth Rodriguez from Cleveland, 35 years. And last but definitely not least, Carolyn Tarrico Brady, San Marcos High School, 35 years of service. So that's over 340 years of service from those longstanding members. That would take us back to 1677. And the only fact that I could find out was Massachusetts bought Maine for $6,000. So thank you for your service, everyone.
Thank you. We are so grateful in our community. I know your schools and the district, for those of you who are at the district office, are so grateful. Don't think of retirement. Please don't. We love what you're doing for us, and don't go anywhere. Thank you so much.
So I'd like, at this point, to introduce the two new assistant principals who've been appointed to our schools. And we'll begin with Shannon York. And Shannon's, and we know her, she's taught in our district at La Colina, and she's been a dean of students at San Marcos for this year. And so she's looking forward to the similar but different challenges of being an AP at Dos Pueblos High School. So welcome, Shannon. I invite you to come on up and introduce yourself. Well, I think the board, for the most part, knows who you are. Yes.
Okay,
You have to speak into the mic.
Thank you. Hello. So one thing I'd like to say is that I've had 8 years in the district, and I've really just enjoyed my time in this district, in particular with the focus on really supporting all students and really understanding that our students come from diverse backgrounds and diverse perspectives, and that's been a priority at both of the schools that I've been at. And I just really appreciate that reflection and that thoughtfulness that this district has, and I'm really looking forward to continuing that work at Dos Pueblos High School. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for this opportunity, and I really look forward to continuing my career here in the district. Thank you.
So we're welcoming Matthew Stockton to our district from, what's the district you work in? Pleasant Valley School District, which I'm still learning the local districts, which serves Camarillo. And Matt is Dean of Students at Monte Vista Junior High, and he taught high school English at Fillmore High School. So he's had a blend of secondary backgrounds. And so welcome, Matt. I'll let you say a few words to the crowd and to the board.
Hi. First, I want to thank Mr. Matsuoka and the leadership team and the board for giving me this opportunity. I've always held Santa Barbara Unified with high regard. The core values of this district have always aligned very well with my vision and mission for students and for learning. So I'm thrilled with this opportunity and really excited to get started at Santa Barbara High School. Thank you.
Thank you. So the Dean of Students process wrapped up this afternoon, so we did not have time to invite them to this board meeting, but we'll have them come to the June 13th board meeting so you can meet them. 2 of them are teachers in our district, and 1 is from outside our district. So we look forward to having you meet them in about 3 weeks.
Great, thank you. All right, E7, board comments and correspondence. Board members, is there anything to share at this point? Mrs. Moten?
Yes, I wanted to give a shout out to our schools again who received the Gold Ribbon Award down in Los Angeles this past week, and how excited I was to be there and how inspired I was to be there as well, and to thank our students and our teachers for continuing to do great work in this district, and we were well represented, so I had a really good time being there. I also want to give a shout out to Nancy Weiss here and the Santa Barbara Catering, because we were First Five was doing a small catering reception for Dr. Bill Cerrone, and I needed a last minute, I need someone to cater this event. And she just stepped up and there was really about the food and also about the service. So I just wanted to make sure that we said thank you for that. It was great food, and they'll want you back as well. So thank you.
Mr. Paredes Ulloa.
On the Nancy Weiss love train, I'm going to continue with, I went to the community health fair this weekend, as did Mr. Matsuoka, and I just thought it was a great event, and of course Nancy was holding it down with our mobile cafe, and long line of people just absolutely loving the food, so again, great event. Thank you, Nancy, for making it even better, and yeah, again, it was just a great opportunity for our families and our parents to really get some services, get some information, resources that they desperately need, or may need so their students can be concentrating on being good students in our classroom as opposed to worrying about any health issues.
And Ms. Capps?
Yeah, let's see, this last week I had the honor of representing the district on a topic of concussions. There was a screening of the movie Concussion starring Will Smith, and it was a panel with the Cottage Hospital, and so I was able, thanks with Lauren's help, learn all about our policies and working with our athletic directors to make sure that we were able to communicate all of the steps that have been taking place in the last several years, and awareness about concussions and the safety first and the money that's devoted to our athletics, and really the strong partnership between Cottage and the district. The doctor who runs the concussion center at Cottage was glowing about the symbiotic nature and relationship between the two. And so just something I was proud that I seem to be, with this epidemic ahead of the curve and really focused on it and really taking it very seriously. So it's good. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And that brings us to the consent agenda. Looking at the consent agenda items, board members, are there any to poll? Oh, sorry, is there public comment on I'm trying to skip right forward. I'm missing E8. Public comments on non-agenda matters within jurisdiction of the Board of Education.
All right, we have 2 members here in the community for public comments. We have Zacharias Garcia and then Irma Cordova.
Muy buenas tardes, miembros de la mesa directiva y educación, miembros del público. Mi nombre es Irma Córdoba y soy madre de 2 hijos, uno en el grado 8 en Santa Bárbara High School y otro en 3er grado en Franklin Elementary School. Estoy aquí representando la clase de Padres Adelante en Santa Bárbara Junior High School y vengo para elogiar al director, señor Lito García, por la implementación del almuerzo con padres cada primer jueves del mes. Pienso que esto es muy beneficioso e importante, tanto como para nosotros, los padres, como para nuestros hijos. Pienso que es un beneficio porque nos da la oportunidad de conocer e involucrarnos un poco más en la escuela y poder conocer las amistades de nuestros hijos. Y pienso que aumenta la confianza hacia los padres, de los niños hacia los padres. Una vez más, gracias al señor director Lito García y a la Escuela Santa Bárbara Junior High, y a ustedes muchas gracias por su tiempo y su atención. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Gracias.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the Board of Education and members of the public. My name is Irma Cordova. I am a mother of 2 kids. One is in 8th grade at Santa Barbara Junior High School, and the other is in 3rd grade at Franklin Elementary School. So I am here representing the class of Padres Adelante at Santa Barbara Junior High School, and I'd like to recognize the principal, Lito Garcia, for implementing the breakfast with parents every first Thursday of the month. I think that this is very beneficial and important. It's beneficial and important for us as parents and also for our children. I think that it's a benefit because it gives us the opportunity to get to know and really participate more in school, and also to be able to get to know some of the friends of our children. And I think that this improves the relationship between kids and parents. So once again, thank you to the principal, Lito Garcia, and to Santa Barbara Junior High School. And to all of you, thank you very much for your time and for your attention. Have a very good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Buenas tardes, miembros de la mesa directiva y a todos presentes. Mi nombre es Zacarías García. Soy padre de 3 hijos, 2 en Santa Bárbara City College y 1 en Santa Bárbara Junior High School. Yo vengo representando la clase de Padres Adelante en Santa Bárbara Junior High School. Vengo para apoyar una de las metas de LCAP, la de mantener altas expectativas para cada alumno y que extiendan el uso de AVID en los grados del 3 al 12 a todas las escuelas. Yo en lo personal me ha ayudado bastante porque puedo ver las habilidades de nuestra hija. El AVID la motiva para que siga en el camino a la universidad y para que progrese en lo que ella quiere. Por eso apoyo esta recomendación para que beneficie a más jóvenes en todas las escuelas. Muchas gracias nuevamente, atentamente, Zacarías García.
Good afternoon, members of the Board of Education and all here present. My name is Zacarías García, and I am the father of 3 kids. 2 of them are at Santa Barbara City College, and 1 of them is at Santa Barbara Junior High School. So I'm here representing the class of Padres Adelante at Santa Barbara Junior High School. And I'm here to support one of the LCAP goals, the one about having high expectations for all students. And also, I'd like to support the expansion of the use of AVID programs in grades 3 through 12 at all schools. So personally, this has helped me a lot because I can see the skills that my daughter has. And AVID really motivates her so that she can continue her path to the university and so that she can improve on whatever she wants to do. So that's why I am here supporting this recommendation so that it can benefit more young people. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, and that concludes public comment. Thank you, and now we will move to the consent agenda. Are there items to pull? Ms. Sims-Moten?
Yes, I think it is under Facilities 19. Is that on the consent agenda?
So F19, this is the approval of the agreement for architectural services for the cafeteria, kitchen, multipurpose room renovation at Santa Barbara Junior High School. What
Yes.
else?
That's it.
That's it for it. And Dr. Reed?
And I would like facilities number 13, approval of contract award for the walkway renovation project at Cleveland Elementary, and also number 15, approval of contract award for the playground and parking lot pavement renovation project at Goleta Valley Junior High School.
Okay. Any others to pull? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda, and we'll address those at the end of the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Sims-Moten and seconded by Mr. Paredes Ulloa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that passes unanimously, and we'll address the other items at the end of the meeting. That brings us to our public hearing. We have a public hearing on the local control accountability plan for 2720. So at this point, I'm going to move our regular meeting into recess and open the public hearing, and I will turn it over to Ms. Carey and Dr. Ramirez.
Good evening, Board. It's a pleasure to be back with you. Been out for a bit, but I just wanted to, we actually have an item at the end of our meeting report where we'll have an opportunity to openly discuss the content and design and process for the approval of LCAP and the update and renewal of LCAP. But for the time being, wanted to just invite the public and any members of our audience to come and provide any input and feedback into the process.
So board members will have other opportunities to ask questions ourselves, but do we have any public comment on this item? Nope. We don't. All right, then I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and we will move back into our regular meeting. And the first item on our agenda is H1, Student Discipline, case number 2016-17-52.
Yes, and in the case of 2016-17-52, I move to accept the stipulated agreement for full expulsion for one school year ending January 2018.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. H2, this is the approval of contract award for the utilities replacement project at Washington Elementary School, and Mr. Hetyank's going to take this.
Thank you, Mr. Matsuoka, members of the board. The utilities project at Washington Elementary School consists of replacing the water, gas, and sewer lines at that school. We knew they were in bad shape. However, when we closed off the gas while we did some fumigation a couple months ago, when the gas company came to turn the gas back on, they found numerous areas where there were leaks in the line, and the line was not holding the pressure it was intended to. So for the last couple of months, the gas has been shut off. Luckily, we've not needed heat at that school, but in the fall, we will need heat at that school, and other than the portable classrooms, that heat is provided using the gas served by these lines. When we originally envisioned this project, we envisioned replacing the gas lines from the point of connection near the street at the front of the school down the main hallway. Realizing that from the original conception of this project to where we are today, during the beginning of the design phase, we increased the scope to include going down from the main hallway out to the fingers to each site. We had hoped to accomplish this within the budget, and it appears that that assumption was grossly miscalculated, to say the least. In addition, we have only one contractor bid this project. We did not have competition for this project. If it were not for the fact that the gas lines, once we start tearing up and trying to repair and not knowing how far we would go, I would probably recommend that this work wait until next summer, where we can rebid the project with a greater competition. In doing that, we also risk inflation. And so it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Do we pay the extra now and pay the price for a lack of competition, or do we take a chance and try and do the project next summer? And prices for construction may still be high, contractors may still be busy, and there's no guarantee we're going to get the participation that we would expect. We caught the worst of both worlds in that the gas line failed and that we only had one contractor bidding on the job. Everybody's busy this summer as far as civil and underground work, and so I could mitigate part of this by suggesting that we fund a portion of it with leftover Measure R funds, but that's not a long-term solution to the problem. That would be a short-term solution for one project, and we can't keep augmenting funds when we're over budget. We just have to do a better job of staying on budget and cost estimating.
Board members, any questions for Mr. Hetyank? Ms. Sims-Moton?
Yes, so I appreciate the background, but my concern is so that what we know right now is $305,000. So by the time you get in there, do you anticipate any additional cost?
I wish I had an answer to that question. I always say on any project when we're digging in the ground that I'd like to have a 10% contingency for unknowns, and I'd be very happy to only use 1 or 2% based on what we find. We're replacing the full line, so if we find lines that are deteriorated, that's not going to be an extra expense. If we hit a line that we don't know is there, of some sort of other utility that did not show up in any of our investigations on what's underground, there's always that possibility when you're digging in the ground. So I would hope that we wouldn't need the contingency, but I can't stand before you and say we won't.
So And we've had some of that come before us before with regards to the projects being over budget. So are there any strategies that you're looking for, how we mitigate that?
One strategy would be to better advertise our project to contractors outside of Santa Barbara. We typically advertise in the local newspaper for our contractors. Plan rooms do pick up the information, but I think advertising, especially in newspapers in Ventura and Santa Maria, may be beneficial in bringing in more competition to hopefully bring the prices down. Our underground contractors in this town are overextended for this time of year, and with the lack of competition, our prices just went up, and we didn't see that coming.
And I would just say one last comment in regards to, we're right in the middle of constructing and upgrading our facilities, so this is an ongoing problem. So,
correct.
You know, how do we address that going forward? Because I don't think they're going to get less busier.
No, we're going to have to do a better job of cost estimating, and in the future, we'll have to come before the board and discuss that if prices continue to escalate, what are we not going to do that we thought we were going to do, and reprioritize remaining projects, whether that's done towards the end of the first sale, second sale. I mean, we need to start thinking about that right away. During the first sale, I would think we need to come and give you our predictions. We're hopefully that the spike in construction will level off and go back down a little bit. I mean, we thought inflation was around 4%. Mr. Matsuoka has been talking to people. I've been talking to people. It's closer to 8, 9% for this past year. Hopefully it won't continue at that rate, but everybody's busy, and when everybody's busy, if they're going to take on extra work, they're typically going to charge more for it than if they were not busy. So we need to beat the bushes. We need to really have frank discussions with our designers about keeping on budget and cost estimating, and do all we can to control costs, and in the end, when we can't control those costs, come back to the board to look at prioritization of remaining work.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Paredes Ulloa?
So has it always been practice just to advertise within the southern Santa Barbara County, or has there been any times that we went beyond, and if so, why did we change this practice?
We've always typically advertised in the local newspaper because plan rooms pick up these jobs and publish them, and a lot of the contractors get their information from plan rooms.
I'm sorry, can you just define plan rooms
a plan-
for the non-construction?
Sure. Plan rooms are entities that contractors look to post information about upcoming projects. Some contractors will read the newspaper, some will go to a plan room. Once you publish an ad in the newspaper, the plan rooms find out about it, they post it on their websites, and plan rooms are where people, individuals, businesses post their plans so they can be viewed and purchased. We use a local plan room called CyberCopy. So if a contractor wants to get plans for one of our jobs, they go to that website. They can view the plans. If they want to download them, there's a fee for that. If they think they want to go through and bid the project, they can get the plans and go through them and do their cost estimating and bid the project. So a lot of the contractors look to plan rooms, but I think advertising actually in the paper so they hear about it twice rather than once, and also we may just have to start making phone calls, calling contractors, try and beat the bushes a little bit to get some competition. We have another school district that's doing work this summer, and we're not the only one in the immediate area doing summer work of an underground and civil type nature. So typically we have a contractor that always bids our jobs that didn't bid any of our jobs this summer because they're busy elsewhere in town.
Any other questions or comments?
Let me offer this comment. So as we learned through the Peabody project, I think the immediacy of going out to bid on projects that we wanted to launch in, like Peabody, in 6 weeks, on this one, this really has to be done during summer. I mean, this is a major disruption to sidewalks, and so we're just running into the crunch of the first wave of projects. What we need to study is how do we pace these things out so that we get a better bidding runway, so that we're not trying to get these things bidded out and end up with only one contractor. So we need to give them some lead time on when we start these projects. Summer obviously is the best window for projects, but our summers have gotten so short. They're like 10 weeks now. So we still will target some projects to launch during summer, but we've got to pace this thing out so we get better bid coverage. And that will improve as we get deeper into phase one. So I will offer that improvement in the system. But I'm also realistic. Right now, we are seeing 10% inflation on almost every project that you're approving tonight. We looked at the estimate. We looked at what it came in. It was a very consistent 10% above. That will soften, hopefully. I mean, but we can't control the market.
Well, Dr. Reed.
Yeah, I just would want to add that I think the idea of going outside of, this area and seeking outside bidders might be something to be considering and having a plan, because that's actually sort of what we're referencing in some of the pulled consent agenda items.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would only add that I would look forward to seeing some evidence that you at least tried, that we've tried that tactic, and hopefully we'll see if it makes any results, maybe the next round that come in. And I'd also say that with this gas shutoff, water and sewer lines, we're talking about basic health and safety for our students at Washington, and this is not a project that can be delayed, even though it's one that is running over. That's really how I personally feel about that. And with that, I do need a motion to approve this contract award for the utilities replacement project at Washington Elementary School.
So moved.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Moved by Ms. Sims-Moten and seconded by Dr. Reed to approve this contract award to Shock Contracting Corporation for the utilities replacement project at Washington Elementary School. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And it passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, approval of evaluations of 2016-17 single plan for student achievement activities. And this is Ms. Carrie and Dr. Ramirez. Thank you. And this is this was new. Let's hear about it.
Right, this is new for those of us who have been engaging in an annual SIPSA cycle. Good evening, board members again, and President Parker. And I want to just kind of, for this item and for a couple of others tonight, I want to try to tie them together so that you and our public can understand how some of these are interrelated. We have traditionally had schools generate an annual single plan for student achievement, which is a document that lays out a school's goals, actions, services, and funding sources that are in alignment with district goals. In the past, these have been generated in the spring. But that does not allow us to do as strategic, or I'm sorry, in the past these have been generated in the fall. But what that has really been is kind of a retrospective on what has already been planned for that school year that's already underway. And so this year we made a big push, and in the fall of this current school year, we had principals author their single plans for student achievement for school year 16-17 and vet those with site councils and ELACs, and then subsequently evaluate several months later the effectiveness of those goals. You'll see in an upcoming item that we are now poised and positioned to do that again, but with SIPSs generated in the spring and then evaluated a year later the subsequent spring. So, as President Parker says, something that is new before the board and new in our district this year is actually having the wherewithal to kind of reflect back on our current year, our active SIPSs, and the planned activities associated with them. And so 17 of our schools did that. So again, these documents that are associated with this item are structured in a similar way, and their format is aligned to the goals that are delineated in the current year LCAP and the current year SIPSs, and use school data, both quantitative and qualitative, to assess the effectiveness of goals, action, services, and go on to also recommend what next steps there might be. In some cases, that might be a continuation of certain goals, action, services, or there might be an adjustment made. These evaluations are also vetted with school site councils, ELACs, and other advisory groups. So we believe that evaluation is an important part of our work. It's been an area for growth for us as a district, and it's wonderful at long last to have a structure and a system for really explicitly calling out an evaluation of our SIPSA budgets, our site budgets and our SIPSA activities. I know you had a lot of reading. These documents are short. They're 2 to 3 pages each. In the case of the elementary evaluations, they feature an early childhood education goal, but for all school sites, they feature evaluations of the effectiveness of goals oriented around cultural proficiency, college career readiness, and student and family engagement.
All right, I'm sorry, I just had one open that was 13 pages long, so. She's like, what? But yes, most of them are fewer than 4 pages long. Yes, Dr. Reed.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I totally commend this process that you have implemented, and it really does provide an opportunity to see what was laid out and what we can do to make changes, and what the principals and sites can do to make positive changes and or keep what you have in place. And I was really impressed with the work that had gone on and the work that the principals were involved in to bring us to this point. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Ms. Capps?
Yeah, just a process question. I appreciate that they were evaluated by these committees, but what happens next to these? I think, again, because they're impressive, so I would hope that they could be widely shared.
So they can be widely publicized. Schools do usually have or are encouraged to have ways of making the SIPSA itself, as well as the evaluation of SIPSA activities, available to anybody who's interested in seeing them. I think something I'd like to highlight in response to your question too is we have not had the benefit in past cycles of the LCAP of deriving information from schools' evaluations of their SIPSA activities in order to inform the LCAP's annual update. So something that we were able to do this year was actually review these evaluations and cull from them things that we could then speak to on a district level that we see as common themes across sites. And of course, that is not just something we can report about, but it's actually something that we can then use to inform goal setting at a district level. So that's, as I opened up and I said these things are interrelated, it's not just the evaluation of SIPSAs and the next year's SIPSAs, it's evaluation of SIPSAs and the next year's SIPSAs and LCAP. And so that did happen this year.
And I would just, yeah, this is a sort of an ongoing thing for me, but the acronyms are just so plentiful that when, just a recommendation to sort of clean these up and make them more accessible to the average person. I find I'm constantly, that's kind of my role, is to ask like, okay, what's this? But it's mostly so I can learn, but it's also to kind of remind us to speak English and communicate a little bit more.
Right. I have often thought that it would be useful to include in some sort of glossary that is a nice reference tool for folks. Yeah. So that's something.
Or just say the word. Sometimes it's just as easy to say advanced reading as AR, you know.
Right.
Any other questions on this one or comments? I'll share, I don't know if Mr. Matsuoka already did, but man, our former board member, Ed Herron, this is an issue that has come up year after year where it's like, okay, well, we're moving on to the next single plan cycle, but really, it's so buried in the current single plan, how the last single plan actually turned out. He was so excited to see these when we got really positive feedback, so thank you. And with that, we are going to approve these evaluations for the 2016-17 single plans for student achievement for elementary and secondary non-charter schools. If there's a motion to do so.
So moved.
I second it.
Moved by Ms. Sims-Moten and seconded by Dr. Reed. All those in favor? Aye. And that passes unanimously. Related to that, of course, is the new year, 2017-2018. And this item, H4, is the approval of the 2017-2018 single plans for student achievement.
Yes, me again, thank you. Building on your last comment there, I would also say that principals found the exercise of explicitly evaluating 16, 17 activities to really help inform in a very direct way their plans for 17, 18. So it was really gratifying to experience and witness the alignment between your current and future planning. So before you for approval are 8 single plans for student achievement. I do want to highlight the goal areas which are aligned to our LCAP. Goal 1 is around cultural proficiency. Goal 2, student and family engagement. Goal 3, college and career readiness. Goal 4 is 21st century facilities and learning environments. Let me rephrase it. Goal 4 is 21st century learning environments. There's actually a shift there. And goal 5 is early childhood education. And so you'll see that as a consistent ordering of goals in the school's single plans. I also did want to report out that prior to this, as shown in the agenda, that prior to this meeting, that we engaged in a board study session wherein board members and district administrators and some other participants were able to be audience members as principals presented through kind of a round table kind of session or structure, the highlights from their single plans for student achievement. So this is really, it's historic for me, who spent a lot of years writing single plans for student achievement, again, kind of after the fact, in the fall when we had already really done our hiring and planning and decision-making. So the idea that we have single plans for student achievement that are authored, vetted, and ultimately improved in the spring to set us up for the subsequent school year is just a much more authentic and strategic timeline and approach for school improvement.
Thank you. Any questions, Dr. Reed?
I just had a comment, and that was in reading all of them and hearing and then seeing across the district what the different schools were doing, you could see commonalities. And I wondered, perhaps like in one school where there was really a really evolved parent engagement program, whereas in another one saying, I'm struggling with how to get this off the ground. And so I was wondering is if there was going to be sort of district collaboration of talking about best practices around these different topic areas, these LCAP goals, because I believe that there are some programs in place that are very, very successful, and being able to have people sort of cross-pollinate their ideas, whether it be elementary or secondary, might be beneficial.
I would just enthusiastically say yes, and also add that there were some constraints about even having the right conditions for those kinds of conversations to happen and to get a lot of traction when we didn't have alignment and when our timelines were not very meaningful. So that is something that I noticed. In fact, I previewed all the slide presentations for the secondary schools for tonight, and I was actually really impressed to see the alignment across all 8 of them. It was not characteristic of what we necessarily would have seen before. Not that there were not good things happening, but it was much more haphazard and much more good things happening in isolation or independence. So we have really good conditions for having those conversations. I know I have plans to do that in a structured way with secondary schools. I'm sure Dr. Ramirez could chime in similarly, and that will be some of our work both in the summer, but then also doing this kind of advanced SIPSA writing and approving also gives schools a really nice, I'm going to borrow the word, runway for revisiting them in the fall. There is some data that we'll get that it's really instructive for us over the course of the summer. And in some cases, schools have a very newly constituted site council. So the opportunity in early in the subsequent school year to revisit the SIPSA generated in the spring and to further upgrade it as might be deemed desirable based on new data and or conversations with colleagues that people get exposure to and are able to take advantage of now that there's much better alignment and more time are just all things that we look forward to and know will help us do a better job.
All right, any other comments or questions? So we have 18 single plans here. We are missing one, and that is OAS. So can we hear a little bit about what's going on? Is that coming in separately, or?
Yeah, that's largely due to the fact that we're having conversations with the staff about really the scope of the school. That's been held publicly. So that is something that is a bit of an open question at this point, but we will collaborate with leadership and OAS and figure out the best way possible to move forward.
Okay, thank you. All right, we do need a motion to approve these 2017-18 single plans. Now, these single plans go up to the state, right?
The single plans actually stay here.
They stay
They're locally approved,
Okay.
but we need to be ready for compliance purposes to be able to.
So if they send if they do a monitoring or review, whatever, they would expect to.
That is correct.
Approve that, okay. All right.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Paredes Ulloa and seconded by Ms. Sims Moten. All those in favor? Aye. That passed unanimously. This brings us to H5. It's Ms. Carrie's night. Approval of world languages instructional materials for adoption.
Hello again. So this is the third time that I'm addressing you on this topic. At the April 25th board meeting, I presented both the process and the decision or the consensus that world language teachers had arrived at about the recommendation for adopting materials. We had a public hearing to that effect on May 9th, and here we are ultimately seeking approval to adopt instructional materials for Spanish, accepting Spanish for native speakers. Those teachers are still engaged in a discernment process, and for French in our secondary schools.
All right, and I got a chance to look at those materials in the superintendent's office, and they look great. So I'm excited to move forward with that. Any questions or comments in those? I do need a motion to approve this adoption for world language instructional materials.
So moved.
Second.
It was a motion by Mr. Paredes Ulloa and a second by Ms. Sims Moten. All those in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. This was supposed to be next year.
They were messing with you.
Oh my gosh. Okay. H6, approval of grade 9 through 12 mathematics instructional materials for adoptions. Ms. Carey.
So in similar fashion, here we are requesting that you approve the adoption of Core Connections, which is the College Preparatory Mathematics, CPM is commonly what it's referred to as, for grades 9 through 12 mathematics courses, Integrated Math 1, Integrated Math 2, Integrated Math 3.
Yep, and this was another one that was great to look at, and I don't know if anybody else caught that our La Cumbre math teacher, Warren Takaya, was one of the chapter, contributing authors for, I think it was for Math 1, maybe. Yeah, of course, it was for Math 1. But it was, that was just kind of fun to catch. But yeah, they looked complicated.
High expectations for all students.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Any questions or comments on that one? All right, then can I get a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
That was moved by Ms. Capps and seconded by Dr. Reed to approve the grade 9 through 12 mathematics instructional materials, and that is the CPM. I'm just sort of pulling that up just to make sure it said that. Yeah, Core Connections. All those in favor? Aye. It passes unanimously. Next up is this approval of memorandum of understanding by and between the district and the California School Employees Association, CSEA, on the reclassification of the speech-language pathology assistant position. Mr. Chirina.
Good evening, President Parker, board members, and cabinet members. I bring before you a memorandum of understanding between the Santa Barbara Unified District and the California School Employees Association in regards to the position of a speech-language pathology assistant. With other positions as related to special ed, the district has experienced difficulty in attracting and retaining qualified speech-language pathology assistants, primarily because the hourly rate and salary range at 40 was too low. The district and the California School Employees Association collaborated on a revision of that job and duties and the salary placement, and the revised job description and the memorandum of understanding are attached as documents. And our recommendation is that the board approve this MOU and the revised job descriptions. Any questions?
Mr. Paredes Ulloa?
So with the revision of the job description, is that going to push anyone out currently holding the position? Or?
It will not push anyone out.
Okay.
How many people are currently in this position in the district?
Oh, that's a good question. I think currently as an SO, one.
One. And I guess another question is, how many do we need to hire?
At least one other.
At least one more?
Currently, we have one SLPA. Can you hear me?
Kind of.
A little closer to the mic.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Thank you. Currently, we have one SLPA. She's bilingual, and she's been an awesome addition, to, especially for our preschoolers who are English learners, or most of them are. And it's as needed. If our preschoolers, if that population continues to grow, we will be seeking for another SLPA. But currently, we just need one.
Okay. Mr. Paredes Ulloa.
So we would be recruiting for it this summer then?
As soon as we get approval of this, or actually, I think we're in recruitment now.
Okay. And I know that we've had issues with filling special ed positions in the past, especially doing it later in the year. Do we foresee any kind of similar difficulties, or?
You know, we are a few weeks ahead of the game, so I think that once we put it out there, I think the salary range will be much more attractive and we'll get more candidates. That's the hope.
So you had this floated and it wasn't getting any?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Moten.
So is this already in the budget for 16-17?
Under special ed, currently, no.
Just the one SLPA.
So, but if we need to hire one more, is that for next year, or how, is that in budget as well?
That currently is not in the budget.
Okay. All right, we need a motion. Is there any comments or questions on the language of the job description itself? If not, then we need a motion to approve this MOU and revised job description.
So moved.
Seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that passes unanimously. Thank you. And you don't get to go anywhere. Item H8, this is the annual declaration of need for fully qualified educators for 2017-2018.
Yeah, President Parker and board members, this is our annual declaration of the need for fully qualified educators within our district. This document must be submitted annually to the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing by school districts who anticipate employing teachers who are not fully credentialed, and specifically in emergency CLAD, BCLAD, limited assignments in general education or special education positions, emergency resource specialists, or emergency library permits. And the recommendation is that we approve this annual declaration for the CTC, our need for fully qualified educators.
Can you roll down to show what exactly is needed this year?
Yeah.
Or for 2017, 2018? So that's the range. Comments or questions? We do need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Sims-Moten and seconded by Ms. Capps to approve the annual declaration of need for fully qualified educators. All those in favor? Aye, and that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next up for Mr. Turina is H9. This is approval of amendment to Maxim temporary staffing agreement.
President Parker and board members, this is an amendment to our contract with Maxim Temporary Staffing. On an as-needed basis, the district tries to retain temporary employees from this agency to fill critical specialties, such as our registered nurses and our licensed vocational nurses. A number of specialties have been added since the original agreement was entered into 2009, so we've had a long-standing relationship with this agency. Those specialties and corresponding hourly rates are shown in the attachment, and also the original document from 2009 in our agreement is also attached. Our recommendation is that the board approve this amendment to the maximum staffing agreement.
Questions, Ms. Sims Moten?
So I noticed that the fiscal impact is unknown at this time. So we have a relationship with this agency since 2009. Is there some historical data that we could use with regards to past usage or how many?
I could try to find that for you, yes.
I appreciate that. That's my question. And then the other question is, so it says also some various funds. Is that by need, or is there?
Yes, usually for some of these positions, and I don't know if Dr. Rodriguez, almost Dr. Rodriguez, Mr. Rodriguez can help me in regards to where these positions are needed. Sometimes because of students with needs, medical needs, we may need to hire a specific registered nurse or licensed vocational nurse to support those needs in their academic day.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions? We need a motion to approve this amendment.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Reed and seconded by Ms. Capps. All those in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. And then, Mr. Tay, item H10, a recommendation for approval to increase the fee for elementary and secondary paid lunches.
Good evening, board members. So Santa Barbara Unified has not raised their food prices for paid meals since 2008. And we're here to ask you to raise these fees slightly. We have some comparative data, right, as you can see up there. We have the current mandated minimum price for paid lunches, which is $2.50 for elementary and $2.50 for secondary. We did, or Nancy looked for comparative districts and found out what they are charging. And you have the current lunch price, paid lunch prices currently for Santa Barbara, $2.50 and $3.25 respectively. And we're proposing a $2.75 to $3.50, which is a 25-cent increase for paid lunches only. And Nancy's here to answer any questions.
All right, board members.
My
Ms.
question
Sims
is,
Moten.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My question is, where would the estimated revenue go to support? What is it going to support?
It goes to support the increased costs of employees because of PERS, and the volume that Nancy's been producing out there with all kinds of programs that she, staffing, how large her program has gotten. And food costs, right. Food costs is going up.
Just a clarification, the mandate, is that from the federal? Is that the federal mandate?
Yes, it is federal funding, so yes.
And it's based on...
You have to come up here, Nancy, if you want to speak.
Get up there.
It's based on the reimbursement, federal subsidies, so we need to come more in line with what they're reimbursing at a paid price, which is $3.80 right now. So we don't see the need of going that far, but a quarter would really help get us to that, and in an audit, at least we're showing our due diligence.
Great. And I know a lot of kids are free and reduced, but how does that impact somebody that, I mean, just that a family where that extra money would be
25 cents?
Yeah. I guess I know you can't sort of respond to, I mean, they wouldn't be then more likely to be qualify for free and reduced lunch because our prices went up. There's no correlation, correct?
No, it's income.
It's really income based.
Yeah, it is income. No, it's true. And it's still moving in a direction that's hopefully someday going to maintain an eligibility provision where we do away with lunch price altogether.
Right.
So these are baby steps toward a stronger department that in turn will hopefully liberate us to a more egalitarian lunch program where nobody's charged.
And I can just add, my son eats lunch every day, and it's such a good deal. I mean, what I was spending on food prior to this year was much higher, and I just know he's getting a great meal for $2.50 every day, and so I'm happily will pay the $2.75. But thanks.
I appreciate that as a parent too, to hear that, because that's really our goal is to hope that parents send their kids free, reduced, and otherwise, just so that our department grows with their trust in the food service program. So thank you.
The only thing I would add is, I mean, we have a number of schools that are school-wide free and reduced.
Yes.
And so, which schools are those at this point?
Well, Franklin, Cleveland, Harding, McKinley, and La Cumbre. And we're adding this year Monroe and Adams to that list of people kids who are eating for free. Yeah, so we're looking forward to that next year.
Yeah, I think that's terrific, because, and I wish that it could push to more of the secondaries, just because I know that there's so many secondary students that don't.
Santa Barbara Junior High, sorry,
Okay.
I forgot,
See,
but they just
that's
established
really-
their base year. This year, they'll come to an end. Next year, there's no POS, and everybody eats. Then it's a matter of when everybody eats, how we can accommodate those minutes in the day that really qualify a good, wholesome, nutritious, calm lunch time where they're not rushing. So that's a discussion for another year.
Well, thank you. That's terrific to hear.
Just
Yes, Ms.
another,
Capps.
because we're on this topic, and who knows when we'll get back on it, but also the process, My School Bucks or whatever,
Yes.
it's really well run, I have to just say. We all kind of are used to interfaces like that where you get charged intermittently, but it sends you like a notification that your account is low, and it's just very seamless. So it's a nice vendor from the user perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're also adding online applications this year as well, which has nothing to do with what you just said, but it is something else that we're doing in hopes of making the application process even easier and more seamless. So.
That'd be terrific. And question mark on the schools that are rolling out to school-wide free and reduced. I mean, I think parents that have not been involved in that will be startled and highly pleased.
I would hope so.
When are you notifying them that is happening?
So that's going to come in their packets when we release the new application, because this year, when we roll out provisions for lunch, it's really important then to campaign for a good submission of all the applications per family. So I know that, we've seen good results from creative principals in the past, and we would hope that that trickle down is brought to all the sites, especially at Adams and Monroe, where we're really pushing to get all families. But actually, district-wide, we know how important it is for families to submit an application.
Yeah.
And the more that go provision 2, the more we have to convince people to turn in the HID forms too, because and that gets very confusing for parents, because at one school they're filling out a free and reduce, and at the other school they're filling out a HID form. So we really need to figure out how we're going to put that out there.
I think once we have more and more schools going on provisions, then the HID form will become very clear. It'll be much easier. I know I'm standing on my tiptoes.
Move it.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Anyway, so the HID form is something separate, but the more we have these provisions in our schools, the more easy it'll be for parents to understand the difference between a HID form and a meal application.
Yeah, okay.
But right now, it's just 25 cents above the board that's going to help us secure where we are with auditors and with our food costs and additional labor.
Yeah. Dr. Reed?
Yeah, I was just going to say that was one of the first things that I learned about in my position on the board, or actually previous to joining the board, is the challenges of getting all those forms in. And so I wondered if there had been movement in the different sites to actually have somebody designated to handle that during that rush time at the beginning of the school year. I know that San Marcos, I believe, has someone there that is involved in doing that, but I'm not sure about the other schools.
Well, and Brian or Todd can step in on this one, but we're planning online registration, and we're hoping that we can somehow, you can't pass go unless you fill out one of these forms. It can't be mandated, But it's also educating our parents on why we need this form. And because some parents don't want to fill it out because they don't qualify, but we need to know how to take those people off the list so we don't burden them with them. But what Nancy does on July 1 every year has to go out. The pamphlet, the packet has to go out by law, so we can't suppress that, but hopefully we can, make it as easy for our parents as possible to turn those forms in. The principals know now how important it is because it's money in their site budgets.
All right. Well, I know that probably all of us would be, don't like the idea of raising rates. I mean, we essentially froze it during the recession. And I think it's pretty amazing that we have not raised rates for 9 years at this point. And I know even just having a change, when people expect a certain number, even if they could afford the extra quarter, it's the change that is disruptive. And so that piece is disappointing, but I do completely understand the need for it, both in terms of federal requirements and local need.
Before the board votes, I just want to add one piece. Ms. Jate, so when we give a district-wide compensation raise, it applies to all food service workers.
That's correct.
And so just want the board to realize from a perspective, if we haven't raised rates since, when was it? 2008. And the district has been giving raises. And so I actually think Nancy's done an amazing job of balancing her books for almost a decade. And finally, we need to raise it because we've been giving the same raises to all of her employees. So just, the longer you sit on the board, we're just going to insert these pieces because that budget area is really run as a separate intact budget.
Yeah.
And that's also true for our early childhood ed program. And are there
Some
any
of our
others?
our bond funds, but
Right, so just realize that we do have some programs and then budgets that operate as a satellite, but they're under our umbrella as far as employees. So that's always the, there's these pieces of our district financially that we have to catch up every so often.
and I just want to add, hold on, Nancy, I just want to add one thing also, that when I worked at the county, I would review budgets, and I would say every single, except for Lompoc, was running a negative, which meant the general fund had to support the food service department. This is not the case anymore with Nancy. I remember in the beginning, before Nancy took this position, that it was running in a negative, and I remember one year it was $500,000. So we do not want that to happen, to have it draw on the general fund. You were going to say.
Yeah, I was going to
She does such a
say,
great job.
we just got the unfortunate news that the state is withholding 2 cents on our reimbursement for the May and June. Did I tell you that? Okay, so for May and June.
I'm always the last to know about budgets.
And it's probably a trickle down or some sort of knee-jerk response from, the CDE, but they are holding our reimbursement, and hopefully they will, once the budget's passed, reinstate what they're withholding. But May and June, without that, coupled with that 2% increase that we weren't budgeting for, that's $76,000 to our bottom line this year that I did not account for. So, yeah, I don't like raising prices either. On the other hand, I think it might validate what we're doing somewhat, because when something is that cheap, people wonder really what it's made of, and I would hope that people just want to support us, So the more we talk about it and the more we support each other, the more hopefully it'll not hurt so much.
Yeah. All right. Do we have a motion to approve this increase in the fee for elementary and secondary paid lunches by 25 cents?
So moved.
I second it.
Moved by Ms. Capps and seconded by Dr. Reed. All those in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. And then H11, recommendation for adoption of resolution number 2016-17-40 of the Board of Education of the Santa Barbara Unified School District, authorizing the issuance of 2017 and 2018 tax and revenue anticipation notes, otherwise known as TRANS. Ms. Jate.
Good evening again. So each year, Santa Barbara has to borrow money on July 1 because 90% of our revenue comes in from property taxes. And each month, starting in July 15th, we have to also give our charter schools their in lieu of property taxes every month on the 15th of the month. This, along with our needs, drains our cash pretty fast, and so we have to borrow for 1 year a particular amount, and I believe this one is not to exceed $10 million. And so this is a common experience for us. The closer you are to being fully funded from property taxes, the more these trans are needed, just because we only get our property taxes in on starting November and April. So every year we do this, and I have to tell you, when I first got here, we're doing a $22 million tran. So you can see we've decreased it by quite a bit. And we ask for you to approve the resolution for this tran.
Any questions? Mrs. Moten?
So where in the budget conversation does this happen? Because if you're doing this every year, I would hope that it's in that budget conversation, particularly since we're new at this piece. I understand why we're doing it, but not having that, I got to tell you, I seen that and I was like, okay, I'm wondering what's going with that. So does that happen in the budget, discussion, that this happens every year as a result of the taxes not being collected till November?
So it's more of a cash flow issue than it is a budget issue. Yeah, we have to pay some interest on it, and the interest is budgeted. But if we get $10 million on July 1, starting, I think, then in April, we start paying back a specific amount. So it goes back within 1 year, the $10 million is paid back and with interest. So the only thing that we budget is the interest, because the $10 million in and the $10 million out is only cash flow.
But where is that shown in the budget?
I will show it to you on June 13th.
Okay, because I was saying this came before the budget, which is part of the issue. If we're going to be, that's where the expenditure is going to show. This seemed like it was ahead of the budget process.
Right, because we need to go through our process, and it's like a bond sale. They go out and they sell our tran. So it's a process that we need to get done prior to July 1. But you'll see it, and you could probably go back into the second interim and see it on the lower part of the first page of the Fund 01 and see the money coming in and going out.
Not unless I was looking for it. So I guess it's a matter, again, for history, letting us know as a new board what those things are that we wouldn't just know to look for.
And you're absolutely right. And there are a million things that you will learn in the next couple of years about this.
But if you can preempt us to that, so my eyes don't get so wide when I think $10 million would be very helpful.
It's actually not a million things that you'll have to learn, but some. I'll just share a perspective. The only districts that don't have to borrow trans are basic aid districts that have pretty deep reserves. My experience, I think almost every, used to call them revenue limit districts, so now it's LCFF districts. I think 95% of us have to do a tran just to get through the unevenness of when taxes are collected. So it's the cost of being a public school district in a property tax world.
Great. We need a motion to approve this resolution.
Now that my blood pressure is down quite a bit, so moved.
Second.
Great, moved by Mrs. Moten and seconded by Ms. Capps. All those in favor? Aye. And we voted to unanimously adopt the resolution number 2016-17-40.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we're at the end of our action agenda, so we'll take a 5-minute break with the board's permission, and then move into our report discussion agenda. So 5 minutes, board. Moving to the report discussion agenda, first up is item I-1. This is discussion of science course sequence. Ms. Carey.
You're going to give it to Nellie. Thank you. As Ms. Nellie Hill is making her way to the podium to assist with this item, Ms. Hill is our teacher on special assignment for science and has worked really intensively at the secondary level, especially on helping to situate us to implement the Next Generation Science Standards, or NGSS. And as part of that, those are already really kind of underway, even in Integrated Science 7 and 8, but we are in the development phase for our high school NGSS aligned courses to officially have them launch in school year 18-19. And so she's going to talk to you a little bit about how, in response to state frameworks and recommendations around the NGSS science courses, how we've discerned, we've endeavored in a process to discern an established recommended course sequence for those. So you're going to learn a little bit about our history in our district around science course sequence and what path we're charting for moving forward. Thank you, Ms. Hill.
All right. Good evening, board members. So to start off, this has been driven by the new Next Generation Science Standards, and specifically our new framework, which calls out a few different choices for high school course sequences. And this past fall of 2016, with the previous school board, we voted on having the 3-course model for high school science, which is biology, chemistry, and physics, with earth science embedded in each course. So after that decision, the next decision to make is what order should the courses be taught in. And the framework specifically calls out that an order should be chosen to prevent each course from being taught as an introductory science. So we embarked on this decision, and I'll show you what we've come up with. And if I use too much jargon, please feel free to stop me and ask questions. So this is the statement of recommendation that we would like to give to teachers, staff, parents, and students for high school course choices. And the purpose of this is to bring clarity to the situation. The purpose of making a recommendation statement is for that clarity of communication. So I'm assuming you read it in the narrative, but I'll give you a second to reread it. So there's a few statements that we include with this recommendation beyond this initial statement of saying physics in 9th grade, chemistry in 10th grade, and biology in 11th grade, and I'll show you those. So first of all is a statement that says this comes from the place of a statement of giving all students access to all standards. And that was the purpose for choosing the 3-course high school model of embedding the earth science into biology, chemistry, and physics, was to give more students a chance to access all of the high school science standards. And that's, again, referred to the 3-course model. So the recommendation exceeds the state recommendation of 2 years and the UC CSU A through G minimum eligibility, which, by the way, is very much a minimum and not actually adhered to. I got some data from UC Santa Barbara that the average student accepted into UC Santa Barbara has almost 5 years of science. So that's more than 1 per year. And that's students accepted into UC Santa Barbara, which is one of the more competitive schools in the state of California. So that I don't have that data for CSU. I'm very curious to find that out. So part of what we looked at with making this recommendation was how can we serve all of our students? We have a wide range of students, some who are going straight to a 4-year or even an Ivy League college, and we have some students who are going on to City College, many of our students. So we want to give all of our students access to the science standards and maintain the flexibility that our community is asking for. So flexibility for AP or IB science courses was part of our conversations of which order in biology, chemistry, physics, of those would be the most compatible. If some
of our highest level students wanted to take an AP course either in place of a science or also what would lead them towards a path of being able to take an AP or IB course their junior and senior year. And then, again, the 3-year course can begin in 10th grade if an extra support class is needed in 9th grade. So even a student who may be struggling with math their freshman year can still get their full 3 years of science, which would be all of the science standards in the 9 through 12 grade band. So our process, we met initially just with the lead teachers, and then we onboarded principals, APs in charge of curriculum, head counselors, and we conducted school site meetings and district level meetings. So we really shook the tree to get all the knowledge we could get out of it and really understand how this decision would impact all of our students, from our most struggling and our most academically fragile to our highest achieving. And it was really important to get that information from each school site, from admin, counselors, and teachers. We engaged in reading sections of the new state framework, which was just approved in 2016. And we also looked at our current status of how many years of science are completed on average by most students. That was just part of our baseline data to see how big is this ask. And with the order of the courses, just to give a little more information, the basic requirement for the CSU and UC and the state requirement is to have 1 life and 1 physical. So with our recommendation of putting biology last, it was a question of that's beyond the 2 years requirement. So how far is that from where we are? How many more students do we need to bring on board and make our classes more accessible for? And we are averaging around 60% of our students are already taking 3 or more years of science, with some schools it being as high as almost 75%. I think that's it. So questions?
Board members? Okay. Yes, so questions. Right now we have freshmen that take AP Physics, for example. Will that continue into the future? Is that, when you talk about flexibility, because it mentions talking about flexibility starting in 10th grade, but maybe AP Physics is just part of the array of options for freshmen.
Right, so because we want to talk to have further discussions with the academies, and we haven't presented that full picture yet, but that has been part of our discussion. So yes, AP Physics 1 is an option currently for our freshmen that are at the highest academic level in mathematics, and they are continuing to take that course at this time.
And then my next question is that statement of recommendation that we recommend that students take 3 years of high school science. The current district graduation requirement is 2 years of science. Is there an idea of taking this to the graduation committee to talk about mandating that this be a graduation requirement?
It's on our agenda for our inaugural meeting next week.
Okay, because of course that would have a big effect on who our teachers are, what electives are then not offered because students are required to take science, and so it will have an effect both on what our students can do, should do, who our workforce is, things like that. So for those of you that are serving on the graduation committee, requirement committee, that will be some interesting work for you. And so what, and maybe I missed it, did you say what is our current average number of, the baseline data for number of years of science completed by our current seniors?
So it depends on the school site. San Marcos High School has the highest. They're about 75% of kids taking 3 or more years of science. Mm-hmm. And Dos Pueblos High School is around 55%. So we have some variability.
Yeah. Well, of course, with the block schedule, that allows you to take double science in a way that it's more challenging when you're at a full year campus. All right, those are my questions for now. Any other thoughts or questions on it? All right, well, I so appreciate the work that you're doing on this. I've been so fortunate to be able to get in close and watch a lot of this work, and I know how hard it is to get consensus. We all know how hard it is to get consensus, and so I'm really impressed with our administrative leadership, with your leadership, and what the science teachers have been doing. So, thank you.
You're welcome. And I do want to give a shout out to how amazing the science teachers have been during this process. We have respectfully agreed to disagree at different times, and it's clear to me that everyone's acting in the best interest of the students, even when we might disagree on what that is. It's been a really wonderful process. So thank you.
Great.
I'll add an observation, because, I've been actually pretty close to this with Nellie, but when you kind of stand back from a distance, and having taught high school sciences, and to think about a student skipping high school chemistry and jumping right into AP Chem the sophomore year, it actually makes me think we need to look at the courses in 7th and 8th grade, and the challenges, they typically are survey courses in junior high, and they probably need to stay in that sort of genre, but that may be a place where we're actually covering some of the content, so that if, some of our kids are jumping into AP. Remember, AP is college level work. So I'm cautious about when a 9th grader jumps into an AP course, and even a 10th grader. And so, that's a real challenge with this restructuring. This is such a huge shift. So I just will add that to our future discussions about the middle schools.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, next on our report discussion agenda is H2. This is a new course approval for Culinary Arts 2. Ms. Carey.
Yes. Hello again. Speaking of coming to consensus, I'm delighted to propose this new course. It represents a collaboration between culinary arts instructors at our 3 high schools, actually 4 high schools, because we have some overlap between the Santa Barbara program, Santa Barbara High School program, and La Cuesta program. This follows on the heels of an approval that you issued for Culinary Arts 1 fairly recently. So it's great to just already have them being able to kind of iterate Culinary Arts 2. This will help to shore up the culinary arts pathway in the realm of CTE. And we look for ultimately a Culinary Arts 3. There's currently less consensus about Culinary Arts 3, because what happens is among these instructors you get different kinds of expertise and interests. But this course, this new course proposal is one that has been collaborated upon with those by those instructors. It also represents a new kind of process for our district, in that our APs over curriculum are coordinating and sharing sort of the work associated with preparing these approvals, also submitting to UC Doorways. So they're sort of taking turns with that, and it's not just the instructors collaborating on new courses, but also the administrators who oversee curriculum in the 3 high schools.
Great. Board members, comments or questions? I will note that this is focusing on the fundamental practice of baking and pastries and cake decorating, with cakes, pastries, cookies, pies, quick breads, and yeast breads. And on behalf of the board, I think we would probably all happily volunteer to be guinea pigs. Just throwing that out there, because I know that there will be a need for them to practice.
Noted.
So please do note. All right, that brings us to, yes, Ms. Hinsbaum.
I just want to say I appreciate the fact that you'll also be, I don't know if it was in the first course, but in this course it's saying that there's going to be the management and learning how to food costs and how to manage it, as well as just being the service part of it, but also be the business part of it. So that also addresses economic, growth in terms of that. Thank you.
Thank you. So question mark for my fellow board members, if you're looking at your NOVA's agenda right now, I don't see item I3 on mine. Do you all are missing item I3? Okay, we're just, it is agendized, but it has disappeared from the board side. We may be able to take a look over on the Santa Barbara.
You can go to the public comment.
Public sign? Okay.
Public comment. It's listed under public comment.
Oh, you mean on the public hearing?
Yeah, public hearing.
Yeah, so is that the intention, that we can go back to the documents? Is it just the same documents that were supposed to be listed?
Yes.
All right, so we will go back to the public hearing then to look at those items. All right, so this is I3, a discussion report on the local control accountability plan for 2720. And is it Dr. Ramirez, are you starting us off?
It will be me. So again, good evening, Board President, Ms. Parker. Very excited to be here and to be able to walk us through. I just wanted, before I begin, to just make mention of the tremendous work that went into this. Really, it has been a team effort. I also want to invite Dr. Mora up to the podium, because there might be some questions that would be relevant to her expertise and her background. But just to open, I wanted to just establish how much this is really building off of previous plans. Every year we have become more focused, more coherent in our work. We feel we took a big step forward with this version. We recognize already that there are a lot of ways in which we are going to make it better, which brings me to my next point. This is a first draft. You can reasonably expect, and I would like for you to invite you to consider that there will be some changes and modifications, not only based on your input, but the input of the county office, as well as one more meeting that we'll be having with our parent and community LCAP committee. In addition, so you can reasonably expect that the plan will become more robust and more concise by the time that we approve or we seek your approval on June 27th. Another point is that to reference the conversation earlier about single plans, the LCAP was really a driver for those single plans, but to reiterate what Ms. Carey mentioned earlier, it really was an opportunity to also be informed by. And so that symbiotic relationship is one that we expect will only continue to flow and become better over time, and as early as not only this draft, but as early as the next iteration. The last point that I would make before launching into the presentation is that different than plans in the past, which were rolling plans or considered rolling plans, which renewed every year for 3 years, this one will be fixed. And so what that means is that we will really get a year 1, year 2, and year 3, and so that should really change the thinking around this plan. So I invite you to think of this not only as a 17-18 year plan, although that's the most pressing and the most immediate, but to really think of that long arc view, and that really brings me to the last point. That is, focus, coherence takes time. It takes time to organize a system as large as ours, and some of these activities are activities that have been here with us for a few years, and many of them we're starting to see some dramatic results. And so we did our best to call those out. We did our best to extend on those, and so with that, I just wanted to provide that as a context, and we'll go ahead and launch. So just a bit of background, I know that for many of you, this LCAP process in its entirety is relatively new. When we last talked as a group or publicly about the LCAP was back in December, and just to provide you some background, I won't go into all the details, but this is really born out of changes that happened to the local funding formula, and dating back to 2013, 2014, when LCAPs were launched in the state. Again, they describe how annual goals for all pupils will be met based on and rounded out by 8 state priorities. But there needs to be a specific emphasis on how supplemental and concentration funds will be spent in that LCAP year. We are not a concentration district, therefore the focus will be largely on supplemental funds. But needless to say, in the plan, and you'll see this, there's a lot of reference to other funding sources. The budget, our activities, who we are as a district is simply too intertwined to be able to think of things in a vacuum or in isolation. In fact, we would be missing an opportunity if we didn't mention and call out other sources and other activities that are very much related to the core activities in this plan. And then finally, and this is really important because it really influenced the design and the presentation of this plan, the work that went behind it. And that is that the funds are intended to principally support meeting goals of unduplicated pupils. And those are low-income students classified as low-income, English learners, and foster youth. Here you have just a side-by-side. Now, this doesn't do justice to how different the templates are. These are pretty substantive changes. Changes that we are finding working through the new template are really for the better. Just if you look at the language, to go back to Ms. Kapp's point, there's less jargon, right? There's less educational ease. And maybe it's not completely accessible to everybody. We're hoping that's something that we can help message out more fully. But you see the plan summary, annual update, stakeholder engagement, goals, actions, and services. And then the last part is something that is both the fifth section of your plan, of the draft, but also very much embedded into other sections, and that is a clear demonstration of increased or improved services for those unduplicated students. That is something that was always embedded into the LCAP, but is now called out in a very, very specific and concrete way, and we're very proud of that. I really have to credit Ms. Carey and Dr. Mora, as well as Dr. Guillermo Juan, who's not here with us right now, but in terms of finding the ways and the opportunities to really separate those and call those out a little differently. I think that's going to be very important also as we model for our school leaders how to be able to work through that in a plan such as the single plan, which inherently brings with it the same expectations. So next we have a development of the process and timeline, and this is really in a bit more nuanced terms put in the memo, the accompanying memo. But these are basically the phases that we undertook as staff and leadership, working with our stakeholders and working as a group to try to get us to this point. And we are now in that phase 5, in that first part where we're looking down in short order at looking at approval. So this process really has taken us at the very least 6 months of planning, and longer than that when we talk about the evaluation components that inform the plan to begin with. So this really has been a very a great driver for the work that we've been doing in the district, and also has been very much, as you'll see in the plan, very much aligned to district priorities. The district priorities that when Mr. Matsuoka came on board, we really started to operationalize in a way that perhaps just really made sense for us to again, bring focus and coherence to our work. So again, here you have some more details around an overview of the design. Our current LCAP, as it is comprised now, is designed around 5 goals. And you've heard them earlier in the study session, you heard them earlier in the review of the single plans, and you'll see them here again. However, just in terms of the design for this year, again, coming back to those district priorities, that was very important for us to really think long and hard about how those district priorities would be manifested, not only in the plan, but in the process of the plan. So when we talk about evaluating our work, the plan begins to crystallize that, but in reality, it's in the doing. it's in living that out day to day that really we evaluate our work. But the other thing is that really we wanted to draw an alignment between services and activities that were really closely connected to those kids that we know need those additional services and supports. So what you have here is just a brief recap of what you have in the memo and what you see in the plan. The plan that we submitted to you and to the public is right now not as one single document. We felt that at least for the time being, it might be easier to break down into parts, and they do vary in length significantly, with really the heart of the plan being that annual update, which is that evaluation and that look back, and the goals, actions, and services being that look forward. So the other pieces are very much critical, very complementary, but if you wanted to focus your energy, that's really where it is. Those two are very closely linked. We're hoping that you can see that alignment from your vantage point. But in terms of the design, I will just make one point, and that is that we talked about the first district priority being the work of cultural proficiency, of equity, and we felt that it was, as leadership, with Mr. Matsuoka really supporting this, that it was important to lead with that as our primary goal. So although it might seem just a reordering. Really, for us, it isn't. I think it's just more of an acknowledgement of where we are and where we've come as a district after many years of working through this, and also an acknowledgement that it is a priority moving forward. So that has come to being that top goal, that number one goal. That's a lead driver for us. Beyond that, you will also see a repurposing of Goal 4. I just wanted to call out that goal, which was previously more focused, a bit more focused on facilities and that development. But what we're trying to do is build it into really talking about 21st century work, academic, and just readiness. And so what you'll see is that will be a huge opportunity for us to bring in elements of initiatives that are now rolling out, whether it's the access to technology, to the proliferation of Wi-Fi and connectivity. The list goes on, and then ultimately that influence into the physical spaces that will come from the generosity of the community by way of bonds, those bond projects. So that really is kind of a nutshell view and a high-level view of what we're anticipating with the overview. So really wanted to, more than anything else now, turn our attention to your input, to your questions and commentary in order to begin to answer those questions or give you that opportunity for input.
Board members, Dr. Reed?
Yeah, I don't know if the other board members know, but I'm just referencing now goal number 1.
Sorry, and which of the documents are you looking in, just so that we can?
This would be the section 4. So under goal number 1, section 4, in the section 2017-18 modified about developing cultural proficiency, including the understanding of the role of implicit bias. That's the section I'm referencing.
Correct.
So many of the board members, I don't know if they do know what you mean by the CPEC self-reflection tool and the process that the district went through over the course of a year. And I'm wondering if you could share that with them so they understand what that means, and using that as a rubric, as a tool, and maybe we could just start there.
I'll turn that over to Ms. Carey.
I appreciate the question. Under the leadership of my predecessor, Dr. Ben Andrade, there was a committee that was formulated, a Cultural Proficiency and Equity Committee. It was a robust district-wide committee. There were a wide range of stakeholder representatives on the committee, and really besides making sure that we were ensuring that kind of robust representation, people who were committee participants and members had been through some kind of formalized equity and cultural proficiency training, most notably IEE, sponsored by Just Communities, although not exclusively. In the larger committee had several subcommittees, each of which focused on different themes or domains, and so that within, there was many months of work actually on producing both a generalized rubric, and maybe Continuum is a better tool to explain that the goal was to operationalize what we mean by cultural proficiency, from very exclusive practices to very inclusive practices. Another way that was phrased was culturally destructive practices, attitudes, behaviors to culturally proficient ones. And so there was a generalized continuum, but then also a continuum / rubric / self-evaluation tool if it were to be used in that way for the different specific domains: hiring, student discipline, curriculum. Those are examples. So the intent of developing a tool like that was to be able to, A, create some common frameworks for understanding, and as I said, for kind of operationalizing what we mean when we say phrases like culturally proficient, and what we mean about those phrases in, specifically a public education setting. But then ultimately for sites, leaders and teachers, staff, school communities, really to be able to use those tools to reflect on how they stacked up against those kinds of rubrics and how improvements could be made. So that work was facilitated with the consultative support of Just Communities, and then really it was put on pause as Dr. Andrade took his leave of Santa Barbara Unified, and so under new board leadership, new superintendent leadership, and new assistant superintendent leadership, really trying to formulate now how we can hold the good work that was done there in a comprehensive approach to continuing our work around cultural proficiency as a district, and then in turn at individual school sites.
So are you currently in the process then of sort of framing what this is going to look like? You're in the process of a plan of whether you're going to utilize this rubric, if you will, and also is it going to be relational to all of the programs that are going on? For example, Just Communities has multiple programs that are implemented in the district, so I'm curious what programs are going to be, do those support this rubric? Is there a program within Just Communities currently that also supports part of this look at curriculum, professional development going forward? I'm just wondering how you're...
Right, so I heard three questions there. We are currently in a process of kind of re-examining what the most strategic way is to be comprehensive in our efforts around cultural proficiency. I think the tool is a really valuable one, but we have not yet cultivated buy-in from people beyond the CPEC committee to adopt and use that tool. So we need to kind of re-examine what we want to do with that and with that work. It's certainly inclusive of all kinds of programs, those that Just Communities offers, but also others. So this is a good opportunity to highlight that the cultural proficiency rubrics don't just focus on race, although race is probably the predominant lens, but also sort of what it means to be culturally proficient for all kinds of subgroups. And then the third thing would be we do have some very specific and concrete efforts that are taking place around curriculum, specific to your final question. And right now they are not orchestrated necessarily. They are happening in pockets and they're happening at individual school sites. But that goes back to my first point, which is we really need to kind of do a comprehensive assessment of what all the different work is that's happening, and to bring it into alignment, bring those efforts, streamline those efforts. So the way it's expressed here, re-examine the efforts and then kind of bring them into an orchestrated effort. around cultural proficiency.
Right, and it's linking also to the new plan with regards to the implicit bias survey and work that you're moving forward.
So that's a new but certainly related initiative.
So it would be really great to understand how, and I'm sure that you're in the process of formulating it, how these all integrate with each other and what actually supports what relational to the big picture, because it's such a broad term.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, we find this is one of the terms I think that is most often used, but that we spend the least amount of time, like I said, unpacking and operationalizing. What specific programs and supports are going to which aims?
And one other note, and this has come up in our conversations as well. The work of cultural proficiency in our district has been long held, and I'll just make a generalization, around mindset work, attitudinal work. The question, and to come back and unpack that idea of operationalizing, what does it mean then to turn that mindset into action? That's really the biggest question that comes out of IEE, and that has found its way into schools by way of specific groups that involve multiple stakeholders. It involves putting out an action plan. There are very components at that, but we want to make sure that increasingly we are finding ways to be very strategic, to find the ways to get to the biggest impact. And we know that this work really extends into all aspects of our school life, all our district, from the instruction to the curriculum to hiring and certainly in school discipline, because we see the disproportionality that exists from one subgroup to the other. And so I invite you to think of it in those terms as well. All of the work around the attitudinal work, the mindset work is critical. It needs to continue. But the question then becomes, how do we work in the most strategic form to ensure that it's making its way into changes in practices?
Yeah.
Ms. Mouton?
Yes, so on that same goal, so I'm just trying to make sense of the percentages that are in that chart. So can you explain that a little bit more? Like maybe the chart is talking about expected annual measurable outcomes. So where the baseline is and where we hope to be, maybe you can explain that a little bit more, because the other question I have is because cultural proficiency is our #1 goal, how does it then relate to reducing the achievement gap? How does it then relate to increasing the parent engagement?
Sure. So at the beginning of each goal, what you'll have is, we'll look at that one specifically. You have the metrics and indicators. That indicates the tool that's used for measuring student outcomes, or outcomes in general, because during the plan, in parts of the plan, it's not just about students. It also involves perception data collected from surveys. But in this one specifically, you have, for example, in the first one, A through G completion. So we have a baseline, and that's 15-16. That's the last year that we have, because A through G data is done in 4-year cycles, right, in cohorts. So what you have there is a breakdown of all students, and then broken down by different demographic subgroups. What you see there for 17-18, 18-19, and 19-20 subsequent are our goals. And of course, it's difficult because now we're talking about 3 years. So to go back to my opening remarks, when we talk about an annual update moving forward, we won't be talking about a whole reset of goals, but rather measuring versus expected outcomes, right? And the difference in that is that it allows us to better evaluate the practices that we're putting into effect. To get to impact A through G completion is a wide myriad of different practices, from course selections to what you just saw earlier in terms of course approvals, pathways being coherent and accessible to all students. The list goes on and on. It also delves into things that are again not necessarily always topics that we discuss, such as representation of windows and mirrors in the curriculum and in the representation in staff as well. So those are all important topics that come back to that core work. Again, how do we operationalize? But to answer your question more succinctly, what you see there in subsequent years are our targets in order to inform us of our progress.
And then the other one has to do with the SAT exams and the ACT exams, where for the Black African American, there's an asterisk. I'm not sure where that's relating to. Also, that same asterisk with regards to English learners. So I'm just trying to see where that's relative, where there's not a baseline number, but and even going forward, it didn't seem to be one. Is it somewhere else?
That has to do with the number of students that were in that group. We cannot disclose because it would be, typically it's when it's in single digits, because it could lead to some identification.
So how do we measure it all if they're actually taking exams, if they're scoring? So what are we doing with regards to that?
So we do have that data. So we do have the raw numbers. And so that will be, and that's not necessarily manifested here. Here it's just displayed by percentages. So we do have the raw numbers in order to be able to make connections from one year to the next.
Okay. And are those because they're single digits? Is it has to do with outreach? What does that have? What could that be related to?
Again, a number of different elements. It could be outreach in our African American population. That is a small population of students in our district. Nevertheless, important and important that we keep track of all of our students. So commensurate with that, when you have achievement that is now smaller or not on par with other groups, it's going to show up in those single digits and therefore not able to state publicly.
So, and I get that, like, you know, African American population is less than 1% in the county. So my question would be to that, then what are we doing to get out to those communities? Because if it's a small number, then it should be relatively easy to really reach out to the community culturally to figure out how we can bring them in and be more engaged in that sense without singling it out. As well as the English learners, because it's also the asterisk as well.
Right, and there are going to be different reasons with each group as to why. And again, at this point, it's conjecture. We have reason to believe that a lot of it has to do with outreach, but it's also, again, about establishing some concrete structures within our district that also help all of our students access at a commensurate rate. And also, I will add this, these funds are really intended to help bridge that divide. So how do we use our funds more strategically? How do we realign strategies? And how do we also make difficult choices around what actions and activities we may need to prioritize over another? And that's what's going to get us now into a totally different area of evaluation.
Yeah. And I would just say, just in terms of just looking around, just in our day, we have back to school night when we have a certain number that's not attending, and that to me is a red flag in terms of how we do that and how we prioritize and how do we speak to those communities that are not necessarily visible in terms of that. Maybe that's, again, part of the operational part that you spoke about earlier. So.
Any other thoughts at this point? Since we're on that page, I'll continue. I'm essentially looking at page 4 again of that section 4, and a few things there. One is I understand why we're looking at the SAT and the ACT in particular, but all of our students have access to the PSAT and the what was formerly called the ACT plan and is now Aspire. And so for our purposes, since we see all students in that data, that, you know, unless they've chosen to not take it for whatever reason, every student has access. You know, if you're going to, if you know you're going to City College, it does not make sense to take the ACT or the SAT, and people are selecting not to take this for a number of reasons. But we can track that data for our sophomores and our juniors, and so I think that would be really helpful to include just for our purposes, even if it's not something that the state would allow us to use for accountability purposes. I'll note that as of this year, 16-17, the highest score that you can get on an SAT is now 1,600. And so that is using the historical data of scoring 1,500 or higher, which when it was 2,400, and so obviously that needs some readjustment. The LCAP is intended by the state to look at 3 subgroups: English learners, socioeconomically disadvantaged, and homeless and foster youth. We, and I know a number of districts, put in race and ethnic data and sometimes special ed data. And I like that, but I don't know, because it's great to have that picture and it holds us accountable for all of our subgroups, but that is not the state's expectation. Their expectation is that we're spending money on English learners, on socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and on the homeless and foster youth. And so when we put these in here, I don't know if we get pushback, if we could get pushback from the county or the state on whether or not we are really following their directions on spending the money. I guess, so that's a question that I have. I don't know if that's been addressed.
So I will answer that a couple of ways. First, there is some degree of autonomy at the local level to be able to include information, demographic, outcome, particular to the needs and interests of a local community. We would definitely hear from the county office in terms of feedback that was or was not in bounds, if you will. If you look at the planned actions and services, however, while you're absolutely right, it is principally intended to support those demographic subgroups. A couple of things to note. One is that far too often those groups are really not discretely different, but in reality, sometimes the same student can appear in multiple groups. We just, for funding purposes, can't count them more than once. So that's an important item to note. The second thing is that whilst there are specific services that might be targeted for a specific audience or a specific group of students, again, due to the interrelated nature of schooling, oftentimes there is a benefit to multiple groups or to all students. And in order to address that, again, to come back to the point of the design, you'll see improved, you'll see sections there to come back to this presentation here. Under increased or improved services, that isn't just a section in our LCAP, it's not only section 5, it actually is called out in the actual goals, actions, and services section. So what you'll see is that certain sections like goal 1, action 2, and 3 are called out separately because the distinction is made when it refers to the actions included or contributing to meeting the increased or improved services requirement. And so it's not just wordsmithing, it really is an attempt to call out what services are for all students or for certain demographic groups and which ones are specifically for that target population.
Okay. Thank you. One other thing that I would note just in looking through it, and there's a lot to look through, but I have to say, wow, I mean, it does get better. This is much better than, and much more visually, easy to follow. Easy is going too far, but the ones that are less than 5 pages long, definitely a lot easier to follow. So this is definitely an improvement, and I really appreciate it. The advanced coursework and our expectations around high school participation in advanced classes. The one thing I would say there is that there's narrative around the expectation for high school students. When you look at the actual numbers, you're including, say, 7 through 12. But I think that we have to have the same call out of expectations for our junior high school students, that we're looking at their subgroups as well, because it is so, by the time they're in high school, what they've experienced in junior high has laid the foundation for it. And it goes all the way down to elementary. Who are we identifying in our gifted programs? And we need to be held accountable for our subgroups in those areas. And so I would ask that those be called out, and just not necessarily in terms of spending, but just noting it's a whole K-12 continuum, but really in our district, when we start identifying at third grade and the services they get, are we providing equitable access? And so I just want to be sure that we're paying attention to that. Dr. Reed.
Just to tag on to that, on number 4 in Goal 1, Action 2, continue to make progress toward ensuring proportionality in districts' programs of choice and academies, specifically collaborate and share effective practices for outreach and retention of underrepresented students in order to mirror the enrollment of the district's overall demographics. I mean, that we know is a challenge with the academies in the high schools. And some of the work we are doing currently, for example, is with Adams having sent a teacher to Dos Pueblos to participate in the engineering program and then come back with the intent to create a pathway for elementary. I think, just speaking for the elementary piece, that we need to have clearer pathways to these academies. And, for example, Franklin suggests that they have in their current plan going forward, there's SPSA plan, states that they're hoping to develop secondary pathways from elementary for students through their after-school program. So I just would like to sort of call out that there is a need to link from elementary to secondary this pathway and this opportunity for all students. And this is number 4, but I would love to see strategies around this, relational to this work, being considered from elementary for us to be thinking about.
Any other thoughts at this point? So this is just a first look at it, and we will have other opportunities. And when is it that we're adopting it? Is it the first meeting in June or second?
It'll be the second meeting.
Second meeting. So we'll have one more time that it's on the report discussion agenda.
We will.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this point, we're at item J, returning to consent items designated for discussion, and we had some fun for Mr. Hetyank here. So, Mr. Hetyank, come on up. And the first item was pulled by, well, we're going to go in numerical order. So the first one we're going to look at is facilities F13, not F. Yes, F. F13, approval of contract award for the walkway renovation project at Cleveland Elementary School, and that was Dr. Reed.
Yes, thank you. I had an opportunity to ask Mr. Hetyank some questions, and I really wanted to sort of bring it out to public, the concerns that I had, that we were, in upwards of excess of $92,816 of the construction contingency of $85,000, and your talk, which we also referenced earlier, of escalating costs. We also referenced this earlier in our discussion about sort of reaching out to larger, outside of our community and being really proactive about strategies and ways to provide more opportunities for bidding. So we did discuss this. It sort of was a discussion, but it was really for me to call that out and say, I'm hoping that moving forward that we will be looking with a more strategic idea, not to say it's not worked so far in the past, but now we're in the situation that we're in, that we really need to have a more structured and system plan to take care of the situation.
Correct.
That was pretty much it for that.
All right, and with that, did you want to move approval of item F13?
Yes, I move a motion to approve F13 of contract award for the walkway renovation project at Cleveland Elementary School.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Reed and seconded by Ms. Sims Moten. All those in favor? Aye. passes unanimously. And then you also pulled F15. This is the contract award for the playground and parking lot pavement renovation project at Goleta Valley Junior High School.
Yes, essentially, the same idea was that we were over budget, and I was wondering why this hadn't been discovered in the design phase, or prior to the design phase, what the situation was about the slope and the water having entered the building, and how we did not know about that earlier, that we had to suddenly face the music now at this point of the game.
We were informed of that condition by a physical education teacher during a site visit who knew me as a director of facilities and asked questions because they've been waiting for a few years to get their playground pavement renovated, and this particular individual is always asking me, are we really going to do it this time? Are we going to get it done finally? And so in that conversation, before, no one at the school had mentioned to us that there was this problem until this PE teacher mentioned it. I would tell you that the principal of the school and the AP that typically coordinates facilities issues has changed, and so the current administration may not have been aware of the problem. The previous administration probably assumed that the new administration would tell us, kind of a disconnect there. So once we assessed the situation, we had to make a decision on, well, do we add this scope or do we let it wait for a future project and establish a separate project and a separate budget? Part of our decision was that part of the cost of doing construction is the contractor just to get mobilized to be on site. So we knew that we would have a contractor on site. We wouldn't have to pay an extra mobilization cost to get this area done. Then we looked at two things. We looked at the condition of the asphalt, and we looked at the slope. And the condition of the asphalt was better than the parking lot and playground, but it is also in need of renovation. It probably could have waited a little while, but not that much longer. But when we actually went down and looked at the slope of that asphalt right at the doors to see that it was draining towards the doors, especially on the further side to the north, rather than the opposite end to the west, was where the drain inlet is, you could see where the ponding had taken place. I did not realize how much water was actually getting into the building until I just happened to be there when the Red Cross was opening up a shelter during one of our rainstorms where they expected evacuees from mudslides. Evacuation did not take place. It was a good run-through for us in the Red Cross, but when I went and closed up the facility and going into that area, there was much more water there than I expected to see, and that the PE teacher had alerted me to for the amount of water. So during that heavy rainstorm, more water entered that building than any time previously from what I could ascertain. So we made the decision that it'd be best for the protection of the building and in the interest of keeping the costs down to include it in this project rather than having it in a future project. We were hopeful that we could get the work done within the established budget. We had a conversation about that with the design professional. But again, not having 3 or 4 bids, only having 2 bids, we had a lack of competition. However, when 2 bids are that close, that tells us that both of these contractors are kind of looking at the same thing, and both of these contractors accomplish this work with their own forces. They're not going out and getting a subcontractor to do the work. And so in hindsight, we probably should have increased the budget a little bit when we increased the scope. Prior to that, we felt confident that we could get it done within the established budget.
Well, thank you for that explanation. I guess, just the plan going forward, I mean, we're seeing this with other projects too, not only the bidding situation, but also suddenly discovering things that we didn't see. I understand, I've remodeled my home, things come up, but I guess having that contingency in there initially, if there is a potentiality for something, I guess I would just want to make sure that we were sort of making sure that we were looking in that direction and focused on that when we come up with these bids, these opportunities, I said, for bidders.
The good news on the contingency on this project, this is grinding and overlaying. We're not really digging that deep into the ground for any trenches. We do anticipate some work in the parking lot, maybe with the lights, as far as replacing a conduit or two, but we're not going to be digging down and finding utilities or anything else, because we're just grinding the surface and then putting a new layer of asphalt on top, much like you see happening with the highway work around town.
Thank you. And would you like to make a motion to approve this?
Yes. I make the move to approve the contract award for the playground and parking lot pavement renovation project at Goleta Valley Junior High School.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. And finally, facilities.
Oh, by the way, one of these contractors is from Ventura.
Oh, maybe you'll spread the word. Facilities, F19, approval of agreement for architectural services for the cafeteria, kitchen, multi-purpose room renovation replacement and locker room replacement project at Santa Barbara Junior High School. And Ms. Moten, you had some questions.
And my question on that, on the staff report, there wasn't a recommendation, and maybe there's just an oversight on that in terms of what you're asking us to approve today? I didn't see that in there.
Oh, we're asking you to approve this architectural agreement with the architect to start the design process.
Okay, that was just missing. But also, I was just trying to figure out the math, and maybe I think I understand it now. So in your background, you're saying that that budget is about $9 million, with part of that, the construction being $7 and the contingency. So is the 715 is coming out of the remaining after the construction budget and contingency are deducted out, right?
The total budget for the project is the 9.7 million. So our budget is designed to have a construction amount, a construction contingency, and then the remainder of that are costs associated with design of the project, with the construction management of the project, things as any legal fees, plan fees, inspector fees, anything. We're going to have to go to Division of State Architect on that. They're going to want money to review the plans. They have their hands out also. So all of those costs make up the difference between the 9.7 and the numbers listed.
Right, I was just trying to figure out the math, because that's actually the next two questions that I have, because the math was missing for me, but I get it now. Okay. So I'll make a motion to approve item 19.
All right, is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Motion by Mrs. Moten and a second by Dr. Reed to approve this agreement for architectural services for the cafeteria, kitchen, multipurpose room renovation, and locker room replacement project at Santa Barbara Junior High School. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously and brings us
Thank you very much.
To, first of all, coming events. We entered tonight the senior awards, junior high awards, promotions, and graduation season by missing Dos Pueblos, unfortunately, because of the conflict. Ms. Sims-Moten.
Did we approve 20 and 21 in that last motion? Because I had pulled those two.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have those marked.
But it was the same question relevant to the math. So
we didn't, but we need to now go back and let's approve item 20 and 21.
Yes, so moved.
Seconded.
Yep. All right, so item 20, F20, is to approve the agreement for architectural services for the heating system replacement project at Santa Barbara Junior High School. And let's go ahead and take that one first. That was moved by Ms. Sims-Moten and seconded by Ms. Capps. All those in favor? Aye. And then the last one, 21, approval of the agreement for architectural services for the O'Leary Field replacement project at Dos Pueblos High School. Moved by Ms. Sims-Moten and seconded by Ms. Capps. All those in favor? Aye. Great. Okay. So would you all like an updated awards and graduations, promotions list to come out as a reminder? Do you have everything marked in your calendars? You guys are good? Okay. So yes, we're starting that, and we'll be very busy until that Wednesday in June. Also noting that Thursday?
Yeah, it seems like last graduation Thursday.
Is graduation Thursday this year, or is it Wednesday?
Thursday.
Thursday, it shifted, see? Good to know, I would have been there all dressed up with nobody there, hello. Also, coming events, I think Ms. Carey sent out to all staff just information about the Professional Development Week, and we are all welcome to participate in that. We don't go through the normal sign-up process because so would you like us to email you to let us know which ones we're interested in attending?
Yes, we just met today to to kind of analyze what all the assignments were. We did collapse a couple, and we've added a couple, so what we can do is we'll publish it again. It's true, the normal sign-up is more for our own internal payroll and tracking purposes, so we'll get you that information.
Okay, great, and then we can just email you and let you know where we'll probably show up.
Sounds good.
Any other coming events that we should be noting? Okay, then future agenda items. We have a running list. We do have one other request. Ms. Capps, did you want to talk about a request to be on an agenda?
Oh, sure, yes. The Commission for Women for the county, of which I used to serve, has requested to come present some findings on sort of the state of girls and women in our county. They just presented to the Board of Supervisors. And so they have a prepared, they had a town hall, and they wrote up their findings from that, and a lot of them relate to our schools. So they've requested to be on an agenda.
Okay, and we will get back to them about that. And if there's no objection from my fellow board members at this point, then I will move to item M, the next meeting, Tuesday, June 13th, and then item N, adjournment. Good night.